Okay. Now in module 3.2 we are going into this idea of VM subversion, and this idea is quite interesting, and actually around 2006-7 this was a big deal in the security conferences like Black Hat conference and so on. And the idea is that there are several ideas. So one idea is that suppose you are running an operating system without a virtual machine, and you are running an antivirus and so on. Now this subvert, this paper of 2006 showed that one can actually insert a virtual machine with a virus that will clandestinely lift the running operating system on top of this virtual machine. So earlier you were running an operating system and applications on the bare hardware, and you have the antivirus checking for viruses and malware, and then by running some programs surreptitiously one can actually do insert a VMM and a virus resident in the VMM. Now since the antivirus cannot is running in the guest machine, and now this now becomes a guest virtual machine, then it will basically not be able to detect the virus that is in the VMM. So this is similar to the idea of the movie Matrix, where the idea was that we do not know, we are not aware of the fact that we are being run by machines. So so therefore the idea that you can lift your operating system on top of a virtual machine monitor and become a virtual machine, or rather get virtualized, is the idea in subvert. And the idea of the blue pill and the red pill from the movie also came along in the literature, and the idea is that also VMBR is also an alternative to the blue pill paper, but the whole idea is that you are lifting or virtualizing your operating system, and therefore and then you can insert anything in that virtual machine because it is already a malicious one. So and it actually once it was shown, the Microsoft actually asked people to disable hardware virtualization features on the client side system. So because this was quite an effective technique to do this, and there was actually a lot of controversy around this, and authors of the blue pill virus were challenged to challenge that this can be detected. Somebody can detect that an application inside the now virtualized operating system can actually detect that this is happening. And there was the author of the blue pill virus did not participate in that challenge in that conference, but later on it was shown that one can actually detect that it is running on top of a VMM, and that led to this idea of a red pill technique. So now detecting whether you are running on a virtual machine has a virtual machine monitor or a hypervisor has other implications. For example, honeypots. So often companies would like to figure out what kind of malware is coming and trying to affect their system. Antivirus companies do that all the time. We also do it here at IIT Cybersecurity Lab. So the question is, how do you make this honeypot? So you do not want to for every malware you cannot compromise a new hardware. So what you do is that you create containers or virtual machines and create honeypots on virtual machines, and you put rules around the virtual machines so that it is contained. So if the malware actually goes into the virtual machine, malware actually gets into the machine and makes executes, then you can actually contain the damage and so on, and on the same time, at the same time you can actually collect the malware and do analysis, reverse engineer and so on. So therefore many malware started putting code in them so that first it detects whether it is running on a virtual machine. If it is running on a virtual machine, then it stops working. So, it does not do any damaging activities, and therefore, you do not know that it is a malware. So, that is the idea of detecting that you are running on a virtual machine. So, you can detect that you are running on a virtual machine, and therefore, many software that binds to hardware directly refuse to run on top of virtual machine or hypervisor. The digital right management systems may refuse to run on top of virtual machine and so on, but things are changing because now because of cloud and all that, you are actually going to see a lot of real systems running on virtual machines. So, just because it is a virtual machine, not trying to withdraw yourself when you are a malware is not necessarily going to work. Now, the red pill techniques, the techniques that are used to detect that somebody the system you are trying to run on is a virtual machine, is actually based on the fact that these virtual machine hypervisors often emulate simple hardware. So, as I said that this virtual machine monitor or hypervisor run on the host operating system and gives access to the drivers and the hardware, but sometimes it emulates some of the hardware components, and usually they do it on some simple hardware that normally nobody is using today. So, that if you can detect that your hardware that you are accessing is emulated by checking that it is actually some kind of a dated hardware, then you can kind of suspect that it is a virtual machine. Also, there would be time latency variances. So, memory cache behavior. So, you can actually fingerprint the operating system and see what its cache behavior is supposed to be, but when you are mediated by virtual machine, this behavior will be different in terms of latency, and therefore, you can actually detect that. Virtual machine monitor also shares the TLB with the guest OS. So, you can actually detect when you are actually using a reduced TLB size, and there are many more methods. So, we will be actually releasing this paper as well for you to read to know more about this red pill techniques. So, the bottom line, and this is from one of the papers from Berkeley that also will be providing you, shows that not shows, but kind of demonstrates that perfect virtual machine monitor does not exist. So, all of them would be subject to detection. So, VMMs of today, like VMware, they mostly focus on compatibility and performance. So, they do not worry about being detected or not detected, and therefore, they do not provide transparency. So, you can know that that this is what you are running on is a virtual machine through various anomalies, and therefore, this issue of detecting virtual machine is kind of given. So, in the next module we will be talking about software fault isolation, and that would be the end of our discussion on confinement and isolation.